Alrighty. How's it going, y'all? Kevin Kuhn here from Athlete Factors. This is the Athlete Factors podcast. I'm here with an old friend, Stork Grist. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Yourself?
Just hanging out, living the dream. So, for the longest time, I didn't actually know your first name because everybody just called you Stork. So, why don't you officially introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all that?
Sure. So Stork is not actually my first name, unfortunately. My given one was Stephen, but Stork sticks a little bit better. So
Stork sounds good, man.
Yeah, I've been Stork longer than not. So that might as well be the real name. But yeah, like you said, we met a long time ago. My freshman year, college would have been your sophomore year, living together.
Yep.
So background, I went to school, started off pre-med, bio major. I had the good grades, do that whole thing, got about a semester in, realized not my thing, not my interest, not my crowd, cutthroat nature, not a lot of collaborative people. So popped over to exercise science sophomore year, which is where we had a bunch of classes together because I don't think we hung out or really talked a lot my freshman year.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about you except that you lived in my unit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you were gone a lot, didn't wear a lot of clothes, so that's about all I know. So
I was a distance runner, y'all.
Yes, exactly.
So short shorts. Yeah.
Exactly. But no,
that's accurate.
We had, I think, biomechanics and kinesiology together that first semester.
Structural kines with Dr. Hellwig.
Absolutely. Dr. King, biomechanics. He didn't like us a lot.
No. We got our homework done during
did.
class. And
not our fault. He made it too easy.
He put the homework on the board. And I'm like,
exactly.
All right, well,
yeah,
let's get to work.
But no, that sophomore year, I was kind of feeling it out, new direction. And you were one of the other people who actually gave a crap, so kind of gravitated toward that. Getting into the whole performance I was growing up a full year athlete, baseball, basketball, soccer, football, golf, played all of those at the varsity level at some point. Couple of knee injuries, knee surgery my senior year. So I've listened to enough of these episodes too. I know that's a common theme. A lot of us who end up in the performance realm are people who are personally impacted by it. So had a really good experience with PT. Third time around the merry-go-round, finally was like, maybe I should actually take this seriously, and had a pretty good outcome. Was able to walk on, play a couple years of basketball at Cedarville. After the injury, kind of went down that path. So athletic history, nothing to sneeze at, but it led me to getting into this profession. Mm-hmm. So graduated Cedarville, got a pretty good internship with over at Kettering Sports Med in what I now know is a rare environment. We were multidisciplinary. We had strength coaches, we had PT, athletic trainers, orthodox, all in the same building, which it's a good model, and I now know that's rare. So
very uncommon.
So I had a couple really, really good mentors, guys that came out of D1 strength and conditioning programs or some distance runner background. They hired me on after my internship, worked there for about a year total after getting accepted to PT school. So I liked the job. The pay was not quite there. So decided to go torture myself 3 more years of school.
Why not?
So went out to Southern California, lived it up, did a little PT school out there, learned a lot, met a lot of great people, had some good mentors out there, moved to Colorado, where I spent a couple years in private practice, outpatient orthopedics, PT in Colorado after I got licensed. Few really good friends, few good mentors, and about 6 months in, realized the whole insurance, healthcare scam game was like my ethics bone was hurting bad. And I looked at myself about 6 months in, making pretty good money, and was like, I cannot do this for 40 years. Like, this is really what I paid all that to sign up for. And good benefits, good job, a lot of good patients, but it was a mill. There's a lot of people coming in and out. The incentive did not seem like it was to make people better. It was to use the expensive treatments and see them a lot of times. And bill, money. And, the real world comes calling when school stops. And that was not what I wanted to do at all. So I enjoyed the sports thing. There's not a lot of jobs available in sports PT. It's a pretty small niche, and the ones that are for entry-level guys like I was pay nothing. So start doing a little research. I had talked to a Navy recruiter when I was in PT school. They were like, hey, yeah, that's all cool, but we don't really want to talk to you until you have your license, because the Navy was only taking direct accessions at that time, so going straight in, fully trained.
Gotcha.
Picked that back up after a year or so in, and took about 18 months total, but went through the application screening process and got a direct commission into the Navy as a PT. So
nice.
Picked up everything, moved from Colorado down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I worked at the Naval Medical Center there, serving the Marines down at Camp Lejeune. Spent a couple of years working down there. Great job. Love my Marines. Took a job on an aircraft carrier, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN 69 out of Norfolk, Virginia. So spent the last 2 years, just finished that up a couple weeks ago, on Ike, and my role kind of merged again. I was health promotions, I was PT, I was prehab, I was performance. We had what's called a fit boss on board. It's a civilian who's a strength coach. So he was master's trained strength coach, full-time civilian on the carrier. So a lot of collaborative stuff, working on the injury prevention, performance. On the ship, I was the only guy doing musculoskeletal. So I'm writing all the ortho referrals. I'm ordering the x-rays. I'm reading the x-rays. Big expanded scope of practice, direct access, kind of the gatekeeper for musculoskeletal, and then throw health promotions on top. So I'm managing our wellness programs, tobacco cessation, sexual health, sleep hygiene, stress management. That was an awesome job. That's definitely, at this point, I think a lot of those kind of bigger picture things are piquing my interest. Checked out of there 3 or so weeks ago, taking a little leave, and I'm on route to Naval Hospital, Guam, to go be a department head out there and learn some of the admin stuff. So
nice.
Kind of a crazy road all around the country and now world, but we are here now.
That's right. It's crazy how, like I think about all of us former Cedarville grads, like sitting in class together, and like everybody's in such a different place now, but like it's awesome that we can, come back and have these kinds of conversations. It's really interesting to me. I think it's really cool. Guam. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Way out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's half past nowhere, close to nothing. Be perfect. Yeah. 32 by 8 miles of tropical paradise.
It's beautiful. I remember, my parents were missionaries when I was growing up, right? So we moved to the Philippines when I was 6. Well, our trip to get to the Philippines the first time stopped us in Guam.
Okay.
And we were there for, 6 or 8 hours maybe. No air conditioning. Like, I'm glad I was 6. I don't really remember. Sure. But everybody else in the family talks, even now, about how awful that layover was. Just because it's like nothing to do. Like, we just sat there in the heat. But fortunately, I think it's a little better now.
We got air conditioning on base. So.
Good.
and that is provided. There's at least sun. There's some, we'll figure it out when we get there. But it's
tropical paradise.
It's a good place to travel from, so I'm excited. Should be great opportunity.
That's cool. So, a couple years ago, when I saw stuff popping up on Facebook, with you like in a, military uniform, I'm like, what? What is this?
Yeah.
This guy, I was like, was he in like ROTC or something back at Cedarville? And I was like, no, I don't remember seeing any of that. Like, I was like, I guess he joined.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting when I saw that. So brought you on here to talk a little bit about that, just because not too long ago I had a buddy of mine come on and talk about training, strength and conditioning for first responders. He was a paramedic and firefighter, and so I thought this would be a really cool, branch of that kind of area of strength and conditioning that doesn't get too much love, but is getting, it's becoming more and more important and studied, and they've got these tactical conferences that you can go to now where I assume it's a little more into training for first responders, training for military and paramilitary stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about the differences between training, civilians and training those in the military.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely an area that is up and coming, but it's an area that even being a professional, I didn't really understand until I got on the inside. First of all, when I joined, I thought you had to be active duty to do what I do. I now know a majority of the sports performance, rehab, the services that I provide in the military are all done by civilians, either contractor or government employees. So there's a ton of jobs out there. I'll put this plug in. Anyone who's looking for work, this is a great time to be wanting to get involved in tactical strength and conditioning because all branches, pretty much all locations are hiring for those areas. Pay's not bad. But I think it's such a kind of closed box. People that are civilians on the outside don't really know the experience, what life is like. They have a perception. You watch movies, you see things, you assume things. You assume everyone's Navy SEALs, and it couldn't be further from reality. Everyone talks about boot camp as this hard, physical, demanding thing, and it's short of the Marine Corps. It really isn't. And even then, it's a selection mechanism. It is not a training program. It is not periodized. It is not the type of training that makes you better at anything. It's a way to kind of try to break you down as a person and build you back up. So, this notation that it's this tough guys and they do this crazy training to make them better, pretty far from the truth.
When it comes to boot camp?
I would say when it comes to the military in general.
Okay. You're probably going to get a lot of flack for that, man.
No, I mean, society's perception of the fitness and what the military is it does not match reality. A majority of people in the military are kids. They're young. They don't, and anymore, even less sports participation before they get there. So when you're looking at training age of these guys, the recruits you're getting going through now have a 0-day training age half the time. They played video games. They did what all young kids do now. So you're not getting a high volume of people who already know what they're doing. They're being thrown into a physically demanding environment and expected to kind of tread water. So I think the number one battles we're fighting in the performance aspect of the military, the public might think are maybe resources or overtraining, things like that. And honestly, I can speak from my experiences with the Marine Corps down at Camp Lejeune and then with the Surface Navy, as well as some colleagues I have, Army Special Forces and with Navy Special Warfare. The biggest issue is really lack of fitness, lack of exercise, lack of mobility, the same stuff you see in kind of the general population.
Gotcha. So whereas in the past, where society in general was much more active and much more, they participated in a lot more sports, because of that decline in general society, that's just spilling over into the military as well.
Yeah, and it's at a high level now. If you follow any of the stuff, there's initiatives, there's programs, there's people, smart, good people working hard on this at the policy level. Less than half of draft eligible adults are physically fit enough to meet minimum requirements to join the military right now. So, wow. And it's still all voluntary force. So you have a tiny pool of available people who could qualify, and even smaller pool of people signing up. So we know we're not going to get blue chip athletes coming in, and we're trying to kind of flip the script and start treating them a little bit more like that to kind of build them up. I mean, the classic mindset, when you think of PT, physical training, what they call in the military, any movie you ever seen, anyone you talk to, long runs, calisthenics, high load, really not specific for anything, that camaraderie building stuff is still kind of the gold standard. That's still kind of the default, even today. And you would like to think it's evolved, but it really hasn't in a lot of areas. And it's so different depending on what branch you serve in. It's so different depending on your rating, your job, your MOS. So depending on whatever your specialty is, it's different depending on your access. So I think you see the military, you assume uniform, you assume these highly trained, fit people. there's an incredible amount of diversity and range in what a unit might do with one commander versus another. I'm really trying to kind of streamline that together because it's being brought up as kind of a national security readiness issue. We need these guys, we need these girls, all these people that serve to be ready to go right now.
For sure. Yeah, that reminds me of Band of Brothers, Currahee.
Yep.
Right. So like first episode, like you see these guys like they're just running up 3 miles up, 3 miles down, and that's what they're doing all the time. And a lot of those guys are complaining like, how come nobody else is doing this? It's just Easy Company. It's just us.
All right.
And so like that made me think like, okay, is there a lot of variability? So
absolutely.
That's crazy. Like there's like minimum standards, but
absolutely correct.
Above that, it's just kind of like whatever.
Well, and this is a really cool. It's a good time to be involved in that in the military, and I've had the opportunity to go to a couple conferences, speak, and work on a couple groups who are trying to push that to change the minimum standards. Because how you measure fitness, how you test it, will determine how you train for it. Right? Everyone will study for the test. Whatever you make the test, that will drive how they prepare. The people in command, the people in charge, they're smart people. They didn't get to where they are by not being able to solve problems.
Right.
But traditionally, and this is literally an act of Congress. This shocked me when I found this out. Congress dictates and directs that you must test calisthenics, running, push-ups, sit-ups for fitness in the military. That's an act of Congress. That has not changed since 70s, 80s. I'd have to find that exact date. But in the last decade, and the Army really, really recently, they're starting to change the way that they test. So the Marine Corps still does pull-ups, sit-ups, and 3-mile run, but that's once a year. Every 6 months you switch and you do what's called a CFT, a combat fitness test, which is in full boots and utes. So that's the battle rattle, that's the camo uniform you see them wearing around. It's supposed to train more like they fight and test that. They do an 880-yard run, followed by ammo can lifts, so 30-pound ammo can, lifting it up overhead as many times as they can, and then a maneuver under fire drill, which involves a buddy carry, drag, high-low, grenade toss, and some kind of different movements that they kind of test for that. So at least every 6 months, you'll see units start to train more this way. Because I always tell my Marines, you're not going to run 3 miles from a bullet. I'm really not that concerned. I know I'm rehabbing you back, but I'm not that concerned if you can run 3 miles that fast, if you can't get your body up, down, and over something very quickly, especially with external load. So the Army has added in an ACFT. This is not actually being scored yet. And this one got me real excited because I know some of the guys working on this. And it came out, they got a 3-rep max deadlift, a standing medicine ball power throw, hand release push-ups instead of the little military ones. You see guys kind of pumping those mid-rangers out. So hand release push-ups, sprint drag carry with a sled, leg tucks, so you hang up on a bar and bring your knees up to your elbows, and then a 2-mile run. So the Army just threw the slate completely away. And you're going to see, I think, changing kind of top down. You change the way you test. Hopefully we see these training methods come out, but we're realizing, hey, if we're going to train for this, you know how to do a deadlift? They don't teach you in boot camp. They don't teach you in any of those other spots. So they're starting to pop out ads for hiring athletic trainers and strength coaches and PTs to be embedded closer to these units to fulfill that performance role, which is really, really cool stuff. So it's a good time to be in because we're trying to solve some of these problems.
Gotcha. Yeah, that seems so much more applicable to what I assume you'd be doing either in a combat situation or in a situation where you find yourself, in the middle of a battlefield. Like it's not enough to just, like you said, be able to run 3 miles in a certain amount of time. So, I have no idea what it's like being in that sort of situation, but I assume the more generally athletic you are, probably the better off you're going to be. So that makes sense to me. Like instead of just, 3 tests, like making it wider, making it a little more quote unquote functional.
Yeah. Put the fun
that makes sense.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I saw the study. So the Army does a really good job of research, better than the other branches when it comes to this. They have the funding. So if you're in the literature, you're going to see the Army pumping this stuff out. They're pumping out some of the best stuff. But the study that kind of made the Army scratch their head and go down this road was they ran one in one of the Ranger platoons where they looked at the guys who were having the best test scores, and the traditional Army fitness test was push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run.
Mm-hmm.
And they were seeing, and this is the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, that the guys who scored at the very top on these kind of distance events, the high rep calisthenics, were the most likely to break down on the battlefield. So when they actually get downrange for this type of war that we're fighting, you got the body armor on, you're up armored, you're hiking, you're going. It's very hilly, mountainous environments. You're going up and down all over. Those guys, the ones being medevac for back pain, back injuries, not being able to keep up, and so they're realizing, like, hold up, if the guys were putting a rubber stamp on and given accolades to saying they're the fittest are more likely to get injured than our guys who aren't, are we really doing the right test? And so they now have entry level testing in the Army. If you want to get a certain job, you have to hit minimum standards in the door, which they're not super high, but it involves, again, like a deadlift, a broad jump, some kind of basic movements that can show power potential, and they'll say they can train on top of that. But that kind of woke them up, realizing that if all of our data showing that this person is awesome is not holding true and we're downrange, we need to kind of reevaluate, retest some stuff.
Wow, that's crazy. But it makes sense. I mean, if you're paying attention, then yeah, if you just assume that what you're testing for is accurate to what you're looking for with regards to outcome, then yeah, you're going to miss a lot. But if you're paying attention, then you'll be able to tweak things as you go and make the outcomes a whole lot better, right? Like, that's just good science.
Absolutely.
So, and that's what good sport performance professionals should be doing, regardless of their population, regardless of the people they're working with and training. So that's pretty cool. Yep. So do you see more, so like in general population, like I work primarily with endurance athletes, the type of injuries or the type of performance issues that I see are fairly consistent. Like,
sure. Yep.
There's patterns, right? So what type of patterns do you see with individuals in the military?
So that's a fun question. That's actually one I got to present on a few years ago, because it's so different depending on the job and the environment. Policy is almost always written for everyone, when the issues can be completely variable. So my last 2 years being on the ship, I used to joke, tell my colleagues, tell my patients, back pain, patellofemoral pain, and plantar fasciosis, it's not a if, it's a when you're going to get that being on a ship. It's a steel ship, over 200 feet tall, ladder wells, low doorways, you're kind of crouching through, you're on your feet all day. It's 5-pound boots on each foot. It's not an if you're going to get those, it's a when. So those are kind of the big three. You can't really call them overuse injuries because they're just use injuries. It's kind of a built environment problem. That's just environmental hazards. When you're working with the Marine Corps, when you look at the ground combat guys, they tend to have a lot of the shoulder injuries. They spend a lot of time doing overhead, pull-ups, and aggressive work without a lot of mobility training, without a lot of specialized training for that outside of their pull-ups. So shoulder dislocations, falls, they're wearing a pack, they fall an outstretched arm. Your typical lower body overuse type injuries like that. When you're looking at the Navy, and depending on the rate, so surface Navy, those are the guys on the ships going out to sea, and the Navy has a bunch of different kind of environments. A lot of the jobs are largely sedentary. So, I mean, if you think of being on watch, it's the same thing as watching Master and Commander and Russell Crowe movies. You got guys that are standing for hours, not moving, just kind of out there. So, or in today's Navy, they're sitting and looking at a screen. They're not moving at all. So these guys have their sleep jacked up because they might have the midnight watch. They're sitting, largely sedentary jobs, monitoring buttons. aircraft carrier is 90,000 tons. There's a lot of moving pieces on there, a lot of stuff that can go wrong. So 6,000 people on board, half of them got their eyes on something, just making sure it doesn't break.
Wow.
So a lot of the injuries you see are the lifestyle injuries, the sedentary injuries, the chronic pain, the chronic back pain that you can't really exercise necessarily to prevent, but more be aware of it, move around it. Your operators, your special operators, those are your jocks, those are your athletes in the military. Those guys do kind of have a built system around them for performance, but they have your traditional injuries because their mission could be jumping out of a plane and infiltrating an area tonight, and tomorrow it could be going on a river boat ride and doing something else, or kicking down doors in Afghanistan. So their injuries not really predictable. They tend to be a little more fun. They're fun as people. They're hard workers, but it's very different depending on your environment. You kind of have to match that to what you see.
Gotcha. That's crazy. Yeah, I end up watching a lot of war movies. I just find them very, very interesting. So, like, what you were just talking about there reminds me of 13 Hours, where that one dude, he's like flipping tires and grunting really loud, and the CIA guy's like, "Shut up! Why are you so loud?" And he's just out there. He's putting in work, man. He's trying to stay fit.
Yep.
But yeah, like I often wonder, like, how common is that in a military setting to see that sort of training?
Yeah, so I mean that kind of brings in the CrossFit and some of these type fitness programs and everything like that. When people are deployed, so in this current war, I mean, we've had high volume numbers downrange for a long time. We have pretty good infrastructure set up at a lot of these bases. So unless you're doing stuff outside the wire operating that day, a lot of people who are boots on the ground, they are sitting there twiddling their thumbs if they're not actually working. So you might have like a whole week where you're outside the wire doing workups, or you might have an entire week where you guys are off task and you're back in the base kind of working. Mm-hmm. A ton of weights, a ton of stuff, very competitive environment. What they'll say is people tend to come back about 50 pounds lighter or 50 pounds heavier on deployment. That's when you have 6 hours a day to train and get jacked, get cut, or just eat a bunch of food and sit around and do nothing. So the tire flipping, the guys out in the dust and the sand and everything like that, that is absolutely 100% happening. A lot of people use that because you'll see, depending on what branch in your mission, 6 to 12 months downrange with nothing to do except your job. And if your job is you're not doing anything today, you'll go hit that up for 3 or 4 hours. So you can see the guys putting the work in. Just don't sustain when they get back. Injuries from it, sure, but that's actually one of the best times for a captive audience to really focus and train. So gotcha. accurate enough.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you'll be doing, like a little more specifically in Guam.
Yeah, so in Guam, get to take on the admin hat a little bit more. I'll be department head for physical therapy and occupational therapy. So small clinic. I'm the only Navy PT on the island. So if anyone so dependent, like a military spouse or kid who's not a minor, or any retirees who are there, I'm your PT care. That's going to put me a lot as a referral-based provider. I'm going to be doing a lot of back-end stuff. That's not my favorite thing in PT, to be just sitting there on the back end, soaking it up, being busy. So really my goal is to kind of work on some relationships with the primary care, family medicine departments to get out and do some preventative stuff and try to meet whatever local commands are out there and run some programming, some kind of preventative stuff, education. When I was doing health promotions, I learned a lot that getting out in front of people, meeting them, and talking smart on some training. So I do a talk where I talk myths and truths of back pain. I do a talk on injury prevention 101. I do a kind of strength and conditioning 101 talk for people just getting into it, on just kind of giving them some direction on where to talk. So wherever they'll let me put my face and get up in front of them and talk, I'm going to try to get out there and do it. But the people in Guam rotate all the time, so we'll kind of find out what they have for me there. Gotcha.
That's kind of crazy. Like you have some idea of what you'll be doing, but you don't know always 100%. Like It's exciting.
Separate company. Yeah, separate company. It's always flexible. You get used to that real quick. You get
Nice.
show up in a place you don't know what to do, stand by, follow orders, you figure it out. I like to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So I have some personal goals, some things I want to do. I'm going to kind of put my head down and go do it until I get someone who outranks me tell me, hey, I don't really want you doing that. So the military is awesome for that. If you're hard charging and want to do some stuff, as long as you're getting your job done. I've had my leadership has allowed me kind of the latitude to do stuff that I'm personally interested in. So at Camp Lejeune, for example, I started a bridge program. So we didn't really have anything in place between when the surgeon gives them that blessing of, hey, your surgery's done. Okay, done. They think they don't have to come in anymore. To they're going back to the next day, their gunny could be yelling at them to run 3 miles with a pack on them falling down, and they're 6 months post shoulder surgery. They had a Bankart repair, multi-directional instability. I don't really want the first time that guy's butt has been kicked is in formation or in an environment where they can't say no. So we started a program. We ran 3 or 4 days a week after work through our clinic. It got me to put my coaching hat back on, and I was able to take Marines in small groups, and we'd run them through hour-long kind of strength and conditioning programs, anywhere from interval work to plyometrics to strength training. It was very much conditioning based. But as opposed to, hey, you had shoulder surgery, we're focusing on upper extremity, it was, hey, you're a human and we're kind of working your whole body. Lower extremity guys, we're doing a lot of upper body work. It's kind of the whole thing. So just reconditioning after that. That program's still running down there, last I heard. That was a big success. So that's definitely something I want to do in Guam is kind of set those transition programs up. I would love to turn that over to some performance pros. I love to still dabble in that world, but I know there's people whose full-time job that is. So if I could hire them or collaborate, I'd love to kind of start running more of those kind of programs out there. But we'll see what money we got. We'll see what the command kind of supports. But those kind of initiatives have been good in the past, and I'm hoping to start more of those up.
Yeah, that's a huge gap that I find, even in like the quote unquote return to play. With regards to like youth sports, adult sports too, but because I work with a lot of youth athletes, the ortho says, all right, you're good.
Yep.
The PT says, all right, I've billed you for as much as I can, so you are cleared to return to play. And they've got range of motion back. Yep. And they can stand without pain, or they can do basic tasks without pain. So it's like, all right, you're good to go. Go ahead. And it's like, no, like they're not even remotely close to step back on to the court or the field or the track or whatever the case may be. So a lot of, not a lot, but some of what I do with my youth athletes is getting them from the spot where they've been cleared to play to a point where they can actually play. Where they can go to practice, just like you said, like where the first time they're told to do something, it's not going to put them right back into the place where they need another surgery. So that's an area that I think stuff's got to change there.
You need to give them the opportunity to fail for the first time they challenge themselves in a safe environment, right? You need that first failure to be kind of a lesson and not a re-injury. You need that first failure to not discourage them from getting back to playing their sport. When they go to make that cut or that move they used to do and they can't do it, you don't want them doing that in front of all their friends who saw what they used to be. You don't. Are they really going to want to go out and put that work in to get back there? Everyone knows what they used to be. If they're doing that for the first time in front of an audience, that's a good way. And we know that the bigger predictor of whether people get back to full competitive level has nothing to do with the quad index or strength or 1 rep max or shuttle testing. It's what you got going on the 4th floor upstairs. So if we're not providing that in some kind of performance setting to get them there and work them there as a coach, it's coaching. It's coaching not for a sport. It's coaching the movement. If we're not coaching them through that, if they don't have someone who's smart coaching them through that, I think that's the reason you're seeing a lot of lack of participation or people not working their way back. Or one of the statistics I cite a lot when I talk with my guys about this, the return to competitive level rate after an ACL injury 12 to 18 months is close to 75%. So you can read that and be like, hey, most people get back to playing the sport at whatever level they were after ACL. We're really good at rehabbing these. We actually suck at rehabbing ACLs, across the board, because guess what the 2-year rate is? Under 50. So that means 33+% of people that are getting back to that level go do that first year back and they realize I can't do this anymore. They can't sustain it. So there's no sustainment. And, the surgeons and PTs and people who rehab them will chalk up and look at that number and, hey, I get 90% of my people back. Yeah, but when they go play that first year, how many go back for a year or two? How many continue to play it after that? So I have that come to Jesus talk on day one with all of my either pre-op or post-op patients. Hey, when your ortho tells you you're good to go, what he's talking about is that cut he made in you or that surgery he did is healed. It has literally nothing to do with you being you again, right? You need to heal. That's a part of the process, and there's set time frames for that. But on top of that, if you want to be what you want to be again, my time frames are going to be 2 or 3 times as long, because I don't just need you to be healed. I need you to be able to perform again. So if we set expectation day one, I found when you hit those kind of middle months, that 4 to 12 month range where stuff sucks and you're making like marginal improvements on a month, you get the buy-in. But if the first time you break it to them that it's going to be that hard work is when they hit the work, you lose it. So that's a conversation I've got better at having. I have it earlier and earlier. I will rain on their parade as hard as I possibly can and kind of sober them up to, this is not just going to be, you ride it out for a couple months and you're good to go. You really got to put a lot of work in.
Yeah, that's one of those things that people aren't really aware of how much work it takes. Like when you get injured, unless it's like a contact injury, like let's say you have an ACL injury, it's not a contact. The reason you got injured is not addressed by surgery. Like there's either a faulty movement pattern or there's some sort of compensation going on somewhere else. So just getting the surgery takes you back to the point before you got injured. Like it doesn't prevent the injury from happening again. Like maybe the tissues are stronger, which is awesome, but the work that you're talking about, and I think it's important for people to understand this, is the work that will prevent that injury from happening again, because the body will revert back to the movement patterns that it was using before. Or now that this surgery has happened, it's going to find a new compensation. It's going to find a new movement pattern that it assumes is going to work well. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll put you in a position where something else is now going to get out. Like, oh, you've had an issue with your right knee. Okay, well now your body's going to compensate, and now your left knee is next, because now all this stress is going on to this, this other side that can't handle all this stress, and you're not training your body to be able to cut and to accelerate, decelerate, change direction, dynamically stabilize. It doesn't know how to do any of that unless you're coaching and teaching the athlete how to do those things. And the best time to do that is when they're in a position where they're forced to learn a new movement pattern to begin with. Like that's a good time to do it. So that's if you're aware of those things and you understand, okay, like it's not enough to just, like you said, sign off on the surgery. Like there's a ton of work that has to happen after that.
Absolutely. And then if you look at it too, I'd say one of the negative or positives of coverage of injuries, and if you look at Sports Center, you watch these pro athletes come back, the timetables they hit and everything. People don't understand that, one, they're freaks. They're absolute freaks. You should not be remotely comparing yourself to anything they do, because you're not them. You're not remotely them. So the time frames that they're getting are unrealistic. 2, that's their full-time job. That's the only thing they're working on. And 3, they are not in a financially or resource limited environment, right? So for PT, right? Sometimes you have a great PT and they run out of money for insurance, and that athlete can't pay out of pocket to go. So the PT maybe was going to do the full bridge, but they didn't have a chance to do it. Or performance services are not covered by insurance. It's expensive to get better if people don't have the money to put in for that. So typically what I'm telling patients, for any major surgery, any major injury, start a clock for 18 to 24 months after your surgery before you expect to be better. I don't care if you're cleared in 4 to 6, it's 18 to 24 months of work. For a minor injury, maybe 6 to 12. And they look at me with these bug eyes. I'm like, well, Adrian Peterson played in 6 months. I'm like, well, I will retract my statement if tomorrow you come in here and you're Adrian Peterson. That sounds great. I would love to be wrong and let you go early, but I don't think you are. So let's just set it up for this time now. Are you ready to give me 18 to 24 months of work? Because if no, then you need to reconsider really what you're going for with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Do it faster than that.
Sounds great. Here's my record. You want to be competitive? I've had one guy get back from a bank cart repair in 5 months. One. Wow. You want to be the next one? He worked pretty hard. You want to outwork him? I'll be here. I'll help you out. I'll tell you what to do. But, that's going to be a 12 to 18 monther. So put in the work, but I don't want you depressed when 9 months in you're not better. That's fine. That's normal. Like, don't be discouraged. Stuff is a lot harder than you see on TV, than you read about. Like Gordon Hayward, if you're a basketball fan at all, he had a pretty nasty contact compound leg fracture, coming up on 2 years ago now. He was not very good for the Celtics last year, formerly all-star level, and you look at him like, oh, he's never going to be the same. This guy's not even 2 years out of injury. Maybe he's a little more human than the rest of us, and if I were a betting man, I'd be saying he's going to be a lot better this year now that he's had that time to kind of heal and work. Gordon Hayward, his progress is kind of more than normal. Don't use your Paul George, your Adrian Peterson for your comparison. Look at these guys who took a couple of years to get back, because if you work, you'll get back, but if it's a high school kid or a college kid, that might be half your career or 3/4 of your career it takes you to get back. You still want to play the sport and get back? I'll help you. But if you want to go a different way, I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, even when you physiologically are getting close to being, quote unquote 100%, your confidence is not there. It takes so many reps. It takes a lot of, like you said, failed reps to figure out, okay, I can do this. I can trust my leg to do this, or I can trust my arm to do this. I've done it enough times. I'm confident that I can do this. And then you speed it up a little bit, and then you speed it up a little bit, and then eventually you get to game speed, or you get to, real life.
Right.
And then even like that takes time. It's not going to happen in 6 months.
No.
So, unfortunately, I wish it did.
Fail in the training room, not on the practice field, at least for the first time. Like, get those failures out of the way. So that's not even on your mind. You have to think about the other guys coming at you. You got to play your sport then. You can't be thinking about your body when you're playing your sport. You shouldn't be. Get that stuff done in the training room. Get that stuff done in your rehab before you go back out.
For sure. So, did you find it difficult transitioning into military life, or was there some sort of like, were you reading books to figure out how to transition? Was it just kind of like figure it out as you go? How did that all happen, and how did you fare there?
So I can speak to my journey. There's a lot of different ways to join the military. Like, I was as clueless as they come. I learned a little bit living in Colorado Springs, because it's a very military town when I lived out there. But you can read a little bit about it. Everyone's experience is going to be different. All the branches are different. Enlisting is different than going as an officer. As medical, I'm a staff officer, so meaning I'm never going to be in command of troops in combat. I'm there as a support service. So I was a direct commission specialized skill officer. So I kind of went right in with rank. I went right in with the assumption that I know what I'm doing. So in some ways that made it challenging, but the indoctrination process, the figuring it out, I don't have boot camp. I didn't have anything where I'm getting kicked in the face. They kind of joke and call officer development school what I did knife and fork school. We show up, we learn the history, we learn how to wear the uniform, we learn how to march, we learn how to be a professional officer, and then they kick us right out. So that's 5 weeks long. So I was crazy nervous going in, even knowing it wasn't going to be that physically challenging. I changed my training. I knew how the Navy changed. I knew what the Navy's fitness test was. I legit stopped weightlifting for like 6 weeks before I went into training and started doing calisthenics and running. I regret that immensely, because I was in there with a bunch of JAG students and nurses and docs who looked like they'd never worked out before, and I'm like the fittest dude. And I'm like, well, I could have come back down and figured the calisthenics thing out. I didn't have to stop my, deadlifts. That hurt a lot. So getting through that, like literally day one, you realize that every single person that's around you has no freaking idea what they're doing. You know,
Mm.
we're all just there, wide-eyed. We got no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good place to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But when you got a bunch of other people, you look left and right, and they don't know what they're doing either. Like I say all the time, you stand by, you follow orders. Like you figure it out as you go. And as they give you more responsibility, as you learn the lay of the land, you can take more. But my first command, I'm wearing my uniform. I'm like crazy nervous just to walk down the hallways of the hospital. Like, am I allowed out of here? Who am I going to have to salute? All this crap. I'm there for like 3 months, and I'm like, there's freaking half the people here, old, fat, retired civilians. They complain. It's a normal hospital. No one gives a crap. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the environment's so different. You think of, you know, say Marines who work in artillery or infantry being these hard, tough guys, and they are. I love Marines. I can't wait to go work with them again. But they're human. They got normal interests. They got senses of humor. They're like not sociopaths. They're great people.
Mm-hmm.
So you realize that the same people you see in uniform look in a certain way. They're the same as the people you see anywhere else. It's just a job for them. It's an important job, and they do it really well. But 12 months in, you realize it's just a very big bureaucracy. I work for a very, very large corporation, the DoD, United States government, and everyone has a job. You get to know the human factors of it, and it's a blast because now I don't know the total count, but about 1.2 million brothers and sisters in arms who kind of have the same total mission as me. So we got a big old company. I got something in common with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The family aspect, and that was another thing I missed when I worked for a couple years as a civilian. Like, I'm an athlete by nature. I like to win. I like a team. I like a goal. I like a mission. And when my mission is, I need you to show up 45 hours a week, do a bunch of charting, and make this clinic a lot of money, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really bought into that. Like, I don't have any personal skin in this game other than a paycheck. My paycheck is the only skin I have. I don't really care that you reach that goal. Like, you're not putting anything in front of me, how that's making the world a better place other than helping some patients. So I can't do this. The military was appealing because I get that sense of camaraderie, teamwork. I get a bunch of people with the same goals as me. I get a bunch of colleagues who are smarter than me to learn from in a bunch of different areas that I get to interact with. So it's hard to describe the transition because it happens so slow and fast. You think even a couple of years back to the stuff you were uncomfortable with, and it's easy now. But at the same time, when you're in it, like, it just feels like it's day to day. So it's been a great transition. I'm not a salesman. I'm not a recruiter. But there's so much more to it, and there's so much more you can do on the enlisted or officer side, staff or line. The benefits are great. The being able to move and see stuff is awesome. So don't count it out. I was 26 or 27 when I joined, right? Most people, the ship sailed and even thinking about the military a long time ago. I get it. Realize, for my pay grade, for my rank, I'm pretty young. Like, I'm one of the younger guys. So it doesn't really matter your age. There are a lot of civilian jobs, working support, PT, conditioning, medical. There's a ton of jobs. We need a ton of help staffing those out. So look around your area if anyone's interested.
Nice. So let's say somebody who's in high school or college right now, who's watching or listening to this, and they're like, that sounds like a lot of fun, either being a PT or some sort of fitness or strength coach in the military. What do you recommend? What sort of path would you recommend to them to get to that spot?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any single path that's going to get you there. There's not the school for it necessarily. If you want to do the PT side, that's a doctoral degree, so there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through undergrad and qualifying. Army Baylor does have a PT program that's active duty only. Top 5 nationally, very selective. They pay for all your school. It's a great program if you can get in. But no, there are a lot of ways to do that outside of that. Look on the contractor, the federal contractor, and the usajobs.gov website to see what's available. And get out there and learn. I mean, and I'm sure your experience is at least somewhat similar, but nothing other than, the baseline of knowledge in the back of my brain that I learned from school mattered worth of crap once I got out to actually training people. You want to get in performance? It's a human business, number one. You don't train robots, you train humans. So go work with people. Go work with people in different environments. I can tell you this, I don't know a single D1 college if you're a smart kid who wants to get involved in that, who will say no if you go ask, can I come do some free shadowing with you and kind of learn what you do? Oh, you'll be an extra body that can like hold a stopwatch or hold a clipboard or come in there? Absolutely. They're happy to have you. They're happy to let you kind of get some education.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pay. You're not getting paid for it in money, but if you don't have that experience, I don't really care what your grades say with your bachelor's degree, with your DPT. You don't know anything until you actually get out there and kind of put your touch on training people and get your shot at doing that. So I don't care where you're at on your educational level. Rub your shoulders with people who are doing it. I thought I wanted to do it, and I thought I wanted to be a legit like pro sports PT until I rubbed shoulders with some of those people and realized like, yeah, you guys are cool. This is a cool job. This is never what I'd want to do. Like the hours, the schedule, the traveling, I would never want to do that. So, don't put all your eggs in one basket until you've actually kind of figured out exactly what that is. And then if an opportunity arises that's not exactly what you want to do it. My rule is kind of never say no to a good job. So go stick your face in the area that you're even interested in. You're looking to learn. Everyone will be available to kind of teach you, to kind of train you up on it. So figure that out. And then, if you're not near an area with military installations or military bases, that's going to be really tough. Short of actually getting into that environment, seeing it, it's very challenging. So I'd say if you're not near a military installation to kind of stick your face in, go to a local college that has a program, get your face in training with that. First responders, so specifically firemen, maybe some of the police tactical units, but the police have such an admin role, you're going to get such a varied experience depending on what department you go to. But fire departments, all are going to have more of a physical nature, so start getting your faces. I know the city of Denver has a big tactical fireman program where they have performance staff and everything. So, I mean, hit Google and start asking questions like that and start getting your face in, and then kind of roll with where the road takes you.
Nice. I think that's all really good advice. While you were talking earlier about kind of your first day or your first couple months on the job and how you were just like,
yeah.
That reminded me of my first day in neuromuscular exercise physiology class in grad school. And my professor, Dr. Willoughby, well, first of all, he's like 260 pounds. He's like in his early 40s at the time, I think, but just massive. I mean, this dude was still competing as a bodybuilder.
Okay.
But like he's like walking down the hall and he's like taking up over half the hall. And I remember like this was at Baylor. We had some wide halls.
Yeah.
But even in this wide hall, I was just like walking down the hall and I like turning sideways so this dude can walk past me. And then he goes into this room and I'm like, oh, that's where I'm gonna be. And I walk in and I'm like, this meathead is in class with me. And then he's the teacher. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be interesting. And then he just like starts talking about DNA and replication, and he's naming off all these amino acids and all these processes, and I'm just like looking around like I have no idea what he's talking about. And I'm looking at everybody and I'm like, I hope nobody else understands this because I'm freaking out right now. And I'm like trying to like
look cool.
Yeah, like act like I understand. And everybody else just like looks so relaxed, and I'm just like, oh, I don't understand a thing he's saying. So sometimes in that situation, it's a little bit fake it till you make it. But then I quickly understood like over half of what he says is going to go completely over my head. I'm not going to understand it. But that other 50%, maybe it's less than that. Maybe I'm only understanding 25%. I still learned way more from him than from any other teacher I've ever had.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're just in a situation where like, hey, just take in as much as you can and figure it out as you go. And most of the time, other people in that same situation are probably in the same boat as you. So
yeah, but no, that's a really good point, because as you've gone higher in academics, and you see this in a lot of the higher fields, there's this thing we like to fight called Impostor Syndrome, where you assume like everyone else there like is there on merit and they're legit and they're smart and they're awesome, and you're this like, I'm only understanding 25%. Like, I don't belong here. And first of all, that's ridiculous. Like, no one understands more than that, or maybe
Yeah.
one guy. So you're all imposters. Like, no one deserves to be there. You're all just there to learn. So get that out of your head that you shouldn't be there because you don't belong there. And then two, there's the spotlight effect. Like, you think like you're looking lost, and the teacher can like see through your soul, and he's gonna call on you because he's like, you don't even know what DNA stands for. No one is even remotely noticing what you're doing or even cares, but you think everyone can tell. So think about those as you go higher. When you get in those learning situations where you're over your head, you do belong there. You'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. Everyone's faking it, and nobody really cares what you're doing. Like, if you make a mistake, everyone else is going to forget it in 8 seconds, and they're going to move on with their day, where you keep thinking about it. So that's with school and academics and learning. If you don't get comfortable being uncomfortable and being the idiot that knows nothing, you're not going to learn anything. So
that's true. And like, that's the thing. Like, if you're in that situation, you're there to learn. You shouldn't expect to understand everything.
Right.
That's the point. So.
Right. Yeah. If you're already good at it, why are you taking the class? You should be teaching.
Exactly. So that's a perfect segue. What are you learning right now? Are you reading any books? Do you listen to podcasts? What's your way of staying sharp, whether it's specifically related to physical therapy or human physiology in general, or I don't know, it sounds like you study a little bit of human psychology as well. So what's your jam?
Yeah, so I don't read as much as I would like to. A huge podcast guy, so this is big deal. It's my first podcast I've been on, so listen to thousands of hours worth. It's nice to be producing some content, giving to the community.
Is you and Wade Rice, man? Wade's
it's
like, I love podcasts. This is my first time being on one, though. I'm like, yeah, you're welcome.
When I worked down at Lejeune, I lived an hour away, so I had a 2-hour round trip commute every day. So it was just like content, like chewing it all in, learning all this stuff. I'm an auditory learner too, so podcasts like a great format. So I listen to a ton. I don't listen to a ton directly in my field. I did it sometimes I go back to it, but I've learned a lot more to make me better in my field by listening to outside of there. So the Resilient Performance podcast. So that's Doug Kachijan. He's a Air Force pararescue / PT. So he did the Special Forces Air Force thing and then became a PT. He's based out of New York. He's probably one of the smartest guys in our profession, I'd say, from following him on social media and podcasts. Great conversations with some really smart people, not just within the environment, but he kind of all brings it back to that performance. Econ Talk with Russ Roberts. So they've been on each other's podcasts and everything like that, but he's kind of a libertarian leaning academic, real smart stuff. What I get most from his podcast is he has a ton of people on who he has pretty strong disagreements with on either philosophy or economics or whatever. And the way that he can approach having a discussion with someone he disagrees with is like respectful and professional, and they always are like cordial throughout the whole thing. So one, he's incredibly smart. Some of those podcasts go way over my head and some of the people, but he has a ton of people on with really interesting things to say, all sides of the spectrum, perspectives, and you watch these people hash it out with like respect for each other. So that's a good way to kind of learn a lot of stuff there. Revisionist history, Malcolm Gladwell, always a good place. You Are Not So Smart, so that's a psychology podcast for sure. Real good stuff. I have a couple good buddies who are psychologists. They're in the same corps, same branch of the Navy as me, so I end up hanging out with them a lot. And then Focus 3, those are probably big podcasts I'm always listening to.
Nice.
A couple books that were huge for me this year, like two. I swear I've either bought or recommended these two books. They're not paying me. I wish they would. But Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a former World Series of Poker player, maybe champion. But she was like PhD behavioral psych, and then got into poker.
Wow.
So she's got some, and expound on that a little bit. One of her big things she talks about is resulting. That's where, poker is a complex system because you can't know all the variables, much like most things we deal with. The end of a hand is an outcome. So someone wins, someone loses. But resulting is assuming that if you get a good result in a hand, it's because of the actions you did. Uh,
Hmm.
that's a good way to get caught up and play bad poker. You have to be really good at analyzing and owning your processes of how you decide, understanding your probabilities. Her book, Thinking Bets, is all about applying probabilities to decisions you make so you can make better choices. And then don't like be a victim of the outcome. Like you might make a good process, a good choice, and get a bad outcome because it's a complex system and there's something at work that you didn't see. Or you might actually make some terrible mistakes and get good outcomes. And that's where resulting gets dangerous, because if you're doing bad behaviors and you get good results, at some point that dam's going to break and then you're going to be kind of lost. So her book was, it's fun. It's an easy read. Great book. I can't recommend it enough. It helps take yourself out of the situation. You can't really take credit for the wins. You take credit for the processes. And then Range by David Epstein. So I heard Wade talk about the sports gene, which is David Epstein as well. So Range is his new book. I've probably listened to about 5 hours of him talk about it on podcasts. I have not read all the way through it yet. I got a 15-hour flight ahead. Hopefully I can read it on the flight. But so that's the notion that you need to specialize early and go from there. He kind of shoots that down in his book that basically says, it sounds like your journey. I know it's a little bit like mine, but gaining a lot of experience on a lot of different areas that don't seem interconnected. So you have a lot of range and a lot of breadth as opposed to the depth. Will really help you be able to solve problems and end up finding your fit. So you're not going to find your fit by walking a straight ladder. He gives the example of he had all these corporate executives on and they're talking about their path and they're telling these younger audience members like, well, my path was this, but don't follow that. You guys should do the traditional way. And realizing like all these really successful people, they go left, right, up, down, they bounce around because you're not going to find your niche and your fit by finding it when you're 6 years old or 12 or even a freshman in college and just sticking with it, putting your head down in most environments. You got to kind of have your eyes open and bounce side to side, and then eventually you'll find exactly where you need to be. So that book has been, and that's probably in the last couple months, just been great information for me, really helpful for kind of how I got where I am. So that's full sales on all those.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super important, I think. Like looking back, I got my start working with people when I was at Cedarville doing senior jackets.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I was working with
practicum, 1 credit.
Yeah, like the elderly, retired people in the community. And then actually before that, I was working one-on-one with a gentleman with Parkinson's. That's where I got started. Dr. Morris was like, hey, Kevin, I want you to work with this guy, and you're just going to work with him as much as you can and just do as much as you can. Here's like the template that I want you to start with. But, as you learn more in these classes, I want you to, to figure things out. And then he ended up being my senior project, actually. So, like, I started with him when I was a freshman, and I worked with him most years. I think there was a couple semesters where I couldn't. And so, but like every time I'd come back and like working with him, like at the time I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. Like this guy's really old. He can't move very well. Like, like I'm being so stupid at the time because I'm like not seeing this guy as like,
right.
A valuable experience for me, not only like, hey, I can still learn from this guy, like,
right.
And I should take this seriously, like, and I always did take it seriously, but like,
the learning value. I think you can downplay the learning value of I'm just doing this for now until I can learn the real stuff. It's like, no, you idiot, that is the real stuff. Like You're learning a ton over there.
Yeah, like the way I was working with him is not very different from the way I'm working with somebody who's cleared to play, but isn't really ready to play, right? So it's stuff like that. And then some of my elective classes or some of my my non-major credit classes, just had to get credits to graduate. I ended up taking a lot of psych classes, like psych of personality. Like I took a bioethics class. those were extremely helpful in helping me like figure out my philosophy of
Yep.
training and helping me like understand how to relate better to my clients. I could not believe how ridiculous things were at certain points when I was training in corporate fitness.
Hmm.
And like I remember a client came up to me and he was like, "Listen, I just want to talk. I don't really care what we do exercise wise. You're cheaper than a therapist." And I was like, "What? Like, what is going on here?" Like, oh
Love it.
my goodness. I was like, okay, like, and like, okay, does he want me to like tell him what I think, or does he just want me to listen and do nothing? And so we didn't do a whole lot of training, but like we did as much as I, could get him to do. But really, he just wanted to talk. But um, like you never know what kind of situation you're going to be in, and so having a wide variety of experiences, I agree. I think that's super helpful,
Yep.
and not always just learning within your realm and profession
Your si-
is
well, and your silo too, because the more the internet's connected people, it allows people to be in these narrow silos that are infinity deep, and you can be super experts, but you're not realizing like the world has kind of picked up and moved on, and your silo is still back there. So if you're not having those lateral connections that are going out everywhere, you're not going to be very effective, or you're not going to be very effective on a very large scale.
for sure. Yeah, like I love history.
Mhm.
When I was in high school and college, I didn't care about history, but like now I love history.
Right.
So, um, yeah, like I've got this 50-hour long audiobook about the rise and fall of the Third Reich,
Nice.
and I, I've had it for a couple years. It's hard for me to get through. Like I think I'm on the second book,
Yeah.
but like when I do get back into that mode of like learning about that, I'm like, holy cow! Like there's so much of this that you know there's value like
Yeah.
learning how things happen in history. Like there's application that runs over into other things. So um,
Yeah. That
studying
that
studying other things is important.
that that reminds me that kind of talking about the 50-hour book that you can only take in small chunks. The book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So Kahneman and Tversky were psychologists, whatever. But that's a book it's written pretty at a level where most people can understand it, but the concepts they talk about and how they work with human behavior and how we are not logical and rational actors and what kind of defaults we make. So some of the shortcuts our brains make and the ways that we can be tricked and everything like that.
Mm.
I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, and I've been reading it for about a year off and on because it's chewy. Like it has nothing to do directly other than the fact that I work with people with what I do. But you start chewing on some of that, and it's like this is just changing the way I have to approach this. And man, look at this 5 years ago, I've been screwing up and all these people I messed up. So that has nothing directly to do with what I do, but taking those external sources and kind of applying them has been awesome.
For sure, for sure. So um, we can kind of wrap things up. We've been going for about an hour now. So um, what what advice do you have for anybody who's watching or listening right now, whether it's profession related or just general life advice? What do you think is important for everyone to hear?
Yeah, so I bringing it kind of full circle. Find challenging relationships with people on a wide variety of fields outside of what you already know that will make you better. It's the mentor maybe is an overused word, but find people who will challenge you and that you can challenge them all over the place in all different aspects of your life, and use that to grow with yourself as a person. Fail in front of them, tell them when they fail, hold people accountable, but find honest relationships where you're going to be challenged and they're going to challenge you because that's the way you're really going to grow.
I like it. I like it. So, um, do you have like Instagram or Facebook, some way that people can follow you or contact you to ask you questions if they have any?
Twitter, hit me up on Twitter. I'm
Twitter.
at sgrist sgrist DPT. So I'm kind of a lot of retweeter, not a lot of original content there. But if you're following me, you're going to stay up in the PT world.
Nice.
some urban planning and that kind of stuff. Some of my interests, but a lot of stuff we talked about, my interests. Twitter's a good place to hit me up, follow, ask questions, always.
Gotcha. And you know what? We should have done this earlier, like at the very beginning, because you had mentioned wanting to do this beforehand. So everything we talked about today is your opinion only, right? You don't speak for the DoD.
Yes, everything I said is my opinion only. I do not speak for the DoD, the Department of the Navy, or anything else official like that.
Gotcha. We got it in.
Got it in. Legally covered. I don't think I threw anyone too under the bus either.
No, I think everything was good. Stork, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thank you for service to our country and our countrymen and women. Yeah, Godspeed on your journey to Guam, and hope you have an awesome time there. And we'll get you on the podcast again in the future so you can tell us about that work in the tropical paradise.
Sounds good. Thank you for your support as always. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. Good luck with all your stuff going forward, and I'll keep promoting it, getting you more views and everything too.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening, and stay tuned for next episode.